have you on with me because Middle East Forum has been one of my favorite sites for all things Middle East for, I don't know, how old are you guys? Because I feel like I was there at the very beginning.
Yeah, we're 31 years old now.
Yeah, that's about right. Because WorldNetDaily is 28 years old this year, so it's probably around the same time that I started watching you. Anyway, it is for the viewers. If you haven't been to Middle East Forum, you must go if you want to know anything about the Middle East and all the conflicts there, Israel, jihad, everything. And I couldn't recommend it highly enough. So you're here because when I saw you just slamming USAID, I thought I've got to talk to Gregg Roman. It was shocking when, I'm not sure if I have it exactly right, was it $2.1 billion that USAID had funneled to or funded to Hamas since October 7th?
So there's really three categories of numbers that we talked about in that hearing. The first was approximately $122 million that went to organizations that are aligned with or work on behalf of terror organizations in the Middle East. Second number, which encompasses that $122 million, is $164 million. So if you take the difference between the two, it went to other organizations which have radical agendas, which we categorize as anti-American and against American interests in the Middle East and dealing with the effort to combat radical Islam. Then the wider number, $2.1 billion that USAID sent to Gaza since October 7, 2023, was the amount of money that was going into, for ostensibly humanitarian purposes, really had no checks or balances on it whatsoever. So neither funded Hamas, but allowed Hamas to carry out its own actions, because if you think about money, it's all fungible. It's money they didn't have to provide in order to support Gaza's civilian population.
Absolutely. And the people that press the button, print or send, knew that when they were sending the $2.1 billion.
It wasn't just they knew it.
Yeah.
They forced Israel up humanitarian aid force. They built hundreds of millions of dollars failed pier off the coast of Gaza, giving restrictive orders not allowing U.S. troops to actually touch foot in Gaza's shores. And we saw how that ended up. It literally washed out into the Mediterranean Sea. It was one of the largest failures of the provision of civilian and humanitarian aid by the U.S. government in its history, let alone what it did to allow Hamas to keep on fighting.
And the humiliation. I don't think you can dismiss the humiliation factor when the United States of America looks so foolish. I mean, in the last 4 years, how many countless moments have we had? But when it comes to foreign affairs, war, it's particularly egregious, especially in the Middle East. Afghanistan, of course, was the worst example of that. You know, when I think about the NGOs, sometimes I wonder why, and I know this isn't really your bailiwick because we're really going to be talking about the Middle East, but should the American government actually be funding NGOs in particular? Or is there no other way to have foreign aid unless we funnel it through an NGO? Because sometimes you might be even giving it to a government agency over there, or, you know, a dictator if you don't go through an NGO.
Well, let's start with the predicate that I'm not against nonprofit organizations and non-governmental organizations helping the U.S. government provide aid or achieving its foreign policy objectives in other states.
Right.
The PEPFAR in terms of combating AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa, the efforts to promote democracy in Central America in the 50s and 60s, the efforts to bring Nazi Germany out of existence and then to try to bring Western liberal democracy back post-Nazi Germany with Konrad Adenauer. There's countless examples of the U.S. government working with NGOs directly to advance America's agendas overseas. However, when there's no transparency mechanisms, when there's no accountability for the spending of U.S. taxpayer dollars, and when a overt political agenda supplants national interests, I think that's where we start getting in the trouble spots. And then that could quickly spiral out of control leading to the U.S. taxpayer underwriting terror.
You know, we're very, very open about the number of billions of dollars that go to Ukraine. Well, if they end up in Ukraine, but in Israel, for instance, or Egypt, why shouldn't we be as transparent and actually proactive in informing the American people? My ideas probably would be considered very radical for people inside government that think everything has to be a secret, but it's really not, is that we literally have websites, not like the ones we have now. You go there and you just see miles of text on government websites all the time. No normal human being can penetrate that wall of text. And I believe it's deliberate. I mean, it should be very user-friendly. Let's just simplify it that way. And I think that everything, if we could go back 10 years at USAID, that the entire really attractive website would have each line item, how much, and it would go to a page. And my thinking is every principal within that organization, what they're committing to sending it to, and if there's a sub-grant and a sub-grant to some other organization, like that Christian organization you talked about in your article, that it should be right there. And all the connections, here's, Mahmoud Abdul Ali, and he's getting $2 billion or whatever for humanitarian aid in Gaza. And do you think that that's possible? There might have to be some things that are asterisked and no specificity, but at least we'd see that $2.1 billion. What do you think about that?
I think we have to divide the types of information available to the public in two buckets. One, that which is available on the internet, even if it's in thousands of codes of text or thousands of lines of text. And that's an ease of access issue. We were able to find this information because we have large language models and we use databases which distill all that large information and break it down into its most common presentable part. So ease of access definitely has to be improved, especially for U.S. taxpayers who are trying to find out where their money is going. And I do think in grants.gov, usaspending.gov, the information is there. There's a second bucket of information, that which USAID, other government departments do not make publicly available to the American taxpayer, and which should be able to be accessible by way of Freedom of Information Act requests. But even when we filed those requests, we had to sue the State Department, Department of the Treasury, other government departments to pay lawyers to try to uncover this information, which a federal judge in multiple instances ordered those departments to give us that information. And that's information that's reported to the agency, but is not made available to the taxpayer. There's a third bucket of information, which I forgot to mention, which was the lack of required submission details by grantees in terms of those who are sub-grantees, as you inferred, sub-grantees. If you look at any nonprofit organizations, 501c3, tax-deductible nonprofit organization, they have to file an annual tax return called a 990. And when you look at their disbursement of monies in the United States, you know who they're giving money to. But if you look at the disbursements of monies overseas, it's a big, quite literal black mark on their tax return. So we don't even know some of these grantees who got money or the sub-grantees that got money, let alone the internal communications of their organization. Why is that
black mark there?
It's just not required to be reported right now. They have to say which region of the world they sent money to, but they don't have to identify the organization they gave funds to. And it depends. If it's for a government grant, they will. But if it's just you giving $1 to an organization and then sending 50 cents overseas, they don't have to report where that money goes to the public.
Are you saying, though, that, for instance, the USAID, I don't see anything secret in that. If we can know that $3.8 billion goes to Israel for something, why couldn't we know that $2.1 billion goes to Hamas or Gaza? Let's sanitize that. So Gaza. I don't believe that there's anything that I've heard so far that shouldn't be right up and center for the American people, that entire budget, and every time that someone presses the button to wire transfer that money, it should be an audit trail should be glorious. It should be a glorious audit trail. And the person who pressed the button is in big trouble if they mess up. But each one of these grantees should have like its own little website, a profile. And then imagine the power of the American people, hundreds of millions of people actually being the auditors. I mean, there should be audits, but.
Let's throw the censors a bone for a second. And I'll acknowledge that there are some programs which should not be publicly available. If you are trying to encourage human rights promotion in North Korea, not LGBT festivals that are going on in Pyongyang, but if they're trying to underwrite the efforts for North Koreans to be able, the outside world, probably wouldn't want Kim Jong-un to find out about. So, okay, I understand for protecting an individual's identity. Or if you're trying to underwrite American allies in Syria and revealing their identities would bring HTS and Al-Qaeda groups to put a fatwa for a death sentence on their head.
Good point. But I'll tell you what
beyond those very limited circumstances, you should know where the money is going to the end recipient.
And any programmer could write the database so that we've all know about required, little red asterisk, required, they want your phone number or something, required information, and why this should not be on, and the name of the person is in the audit trail. And so whoever has done that, if it's been fraudulent, and when I say fraudulent, going beyond the boundaries that are set, like no LGBTQ surgeries on children in Colombia or something, big list of no-nos, then, you believe we should be prosecuting these people, don't you?
I think that the next step after the hearing that took place at the U.S. House's Government Oversight Committee is to look at specific instances that we've brought to light and see if they warrant further investigation. And if they do, and they find evidence which points to a crime, that should be referred to the Department of Justice. I'm not saying anything criminal has taken place. It's not my position to say this was a violation of U.S. law and this wasn't. But if you take a layman's view of it, this is abhorrent conduct by these organizations. And if I or you, as a normal American citizen, were to have given money or transferred monies even by a third party that ended up materially supporting or even directly supporting these terror organizations, you and I would be prosecuted. So why not hold these other organizations to the same standard? Investigate them, see what happened, and if it does meet the bar of a criminal violation, it should be referred to DOJ.
I want to know what we should be doing about the Kurds and what Israel should be doing about the Kurds. And I'm very worried about the Kurds.
So when we talk about the Kurds, we have to divide them into 4 groups.
Yeah.
And in those 4 groups, we have to get even more granular. But for the purpose of brevity, we'll try to address them by country. So the Kurds of Syria right now are facing no-win situation. On one hand, they have Turkey invading from northeast Syria, threatening to ethnically cleanse them 40 kilometers south of the Turkish border. They have, to their west, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, the new government in Damascus, an Al-Qaeda affiliate, that is threatening to invade them to the east. And then to their south, they have the Iraqi and Jordanian borders, where U.S. forces are currently stationed. And there's talk of the United States pulling out of Syria. Now, in terms of force of movement operations, I understand those individuals in the defense establishment that say that American troops should not be in Syria.
Yeah.
But I also agree with the theory that positioning a limited amount of U.S. personnel with an extremely wide deconfliction operation where you say 30 kilometers beyond this U.S. base, we will not allow any armed parties to operate, is a good combination of keeping a Kurdish U.S. anchor in northeast Syria. It's where ISIS arose from. It's where weapons have been transported to America's enemies, Hezbollah and the former Assad regime. Okay, and keep an anchor there. And if you keep an American presence, I think you keep the Kurds with a semblance of at least some sort of safety, realizing that come under attack, the U.S. will be there to back them up indirect. Not in terms of direct kinetic action, but indirect. If they're
Well,
good enough, we should protect them.
I do. I think so as well. And I am against the forever wars thing. I mean, I'm part of that party, but I'm not an isolationist in the sense. Well, I'm not an isolationist. I just think being smart, being wise with our efforts elsewhere is obviously the most important thing. And we have sorely lacked wisdom for many, many years. And what bothers me is the long trail of, well, I'm going to call it tears, but of 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 organizations and populations that we have betrayed. And as a Christian, as an American, as someone who, I just don't believe that's ethical. I don't think it's loving. It's wrong. It's immoral.
There's also the argument about religious freedom, right? Because the Kurds aren't the only ones who live in Kurdish-ran area. You have Christians that dominate the Turkish-Syrian border in terms of small Christian villages. We don't want them to be wiped out. There's the Alawi population.
No, I'm for the Christians too.
That's not what I mean.
I know.
It's easy to label it Kurds, but we're talking about 17 different distinct minorities that are in Syria that don't necessarily have to have the shield of American protection always over them, but the threat of a potential American intervention, should there be an ethnic cleansing or even genocide type movement by the forces that would rather not see them there.
Well, don't you think Giuliani's men have already begun that with the Alawites?
They killed over 5,000 Alawis on the western coast, well, the eastern Mediterranean coast, but the western coast of Syria. I mean, that is what could happen to these other communities. And I don't know if the U.S. has to go in and intervene, but there should be no lobby in the United States that moves to try to get our government to recognize the Giuliani government, so long as his forces are participating in these atrocities.
Well, he's Al-Qaeda. You put a nice blue suit and he's got his, full beard. That is not a good enough reason for me, for the United States of America to acknowledge him at all. Maybe I'm being a hardliner there, but he is a terrorist and they're slaughtering Alawites. And I mean, or you call them Alawis.
Alawite,
tomato. Anyway, so it is so frustrating to see the slaughter of these people. Those videos of what they were doing to those men, just the torturous brutality of, their last moments on earth, the fear. Put me in front of a firing squad. Don't do that to them, obviously. Right. It's just so cruel. And I don't see the outrage. I mean, I see on X, many people like myself, probably you as well, that are very upset about this. But what is happening on the international level? Because, didn't Germany or what state went to go visit Giuliani?
So the European Union's High Commissioner for Foreign Policy visited. The Biden administration sent a delegation led by the former Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs to see them in Damascus. Turkey is underwriting this coalition by providing them with their arms and training. The Qatari government is paying all the Syrian government's salaries. So you have some pretty nefarious actors. It's almost as if, though, the Shia crescent has been replaced by a Sunni.
Yeah.
By a Sunni.
Cudgel.
Well, just think about the Glen Reaper, right?
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
like now that's the other way across.
It works for me. The Sunni cudgel. I love it.
But
yeah, I noticed that. It just seems like there's this flip that happened. The switch was flipped and it's just changed.
And the history of this, Persians versus Turks, Sunnis versus Shia, in this area of the world, it's 1,500 years old. It's not as if though this hasn't happened before. We're just seeing it done with AK-47s and mobile launch surface-to-air missiles. There's just the technology's changed, the ideology's the same.
Is Syria going to be broken up, or is there any possibility of that? I've always had this little fantasy that the Kurds would get theirs, And I believe that at the end of World War II, and I know that there was that, they had the original treaty, and then there was about a year or two until the second treaty with the Turks. But I think that they should have been made a little tiny rump state. Constantinople should have gone to Greece. And so anything that would shrink that loathsome, I consider loathsome state, not all the people, of course, but Erdogan is such a monster. And, well, I was just revisiting his May Allah Damn Zionist Israel in his religious celebration of the end, I guess, of Eid. We see, and this is Erdogan, we see and know what is happening in Palestine. May Allah, for the sake of his name, destroy and devastate Zionist Israel. And the thing that really ticked me off was not so long ago. Well, it was in the middle of 24 when he said we must be very strong so that Israel can't do these things to Palestine. Just as we entered Karabakh, just as we entered Libya, we might do the same to them. There is nothing we cannot do. Firstly, I know my Bible pretty well, and you should not be living in the Middle East as a ruler and say, there's nothing we cannot do. There's like people like Nebuchadnezzar that would say, don't say those words. Shouldn't he be, aren't the Turkish people ready to get rid of Erdogan?
Well, right now there's millions of Turks marching in Istanbul because of the detention of its mayor. You have the Mahmoud's wife going on stage on Saturday night, a huge rally, saying that the time for dictatorship in Turkey has to end. And it's really convenient for Islamist and Arab dictators to blame their internal problems, to lash out on Israel every time they're facing domestic problems, which is, I think, the substance and the root of Erdogan's statements over the weekend directed towards Israel as well. So I think the more extreme statements he makes, the more uncomfortable he becomes in Ankara. And this actually goes to your question beforehand. What about the Kurds of Turkey?
Right.
Where Erdogan arrested the mayors of dozens of Kurdish majority towns in the east of the country. He has imprisoned the head of Turkey's Kurdish party, Selahattin Demirtas, for years now. And now he's trying to repeat the same tactics against the more secular, I'd say left-leaning, but, liberal center. It depends on how you take this context with Turkish politics. But, if Erdogan is an Islamist party, this is maybe the more secular party that is now protesting on the streets. And I think he's got a real problem on his hand. He's, over the course of the last 23 years, imprisoned senior army officials, imprisoned religious clerics who disagree with his agenda. I think sort of leaned into or even faked a coup attempt 10 years ago. And he has, community by community, tried to stifle dissent. And now this is the perfect opportunity. Every Turk who has been on the wrong end of Erdogan's aggression to rise up and to say, we won't take this kind of non-democratic, dictatorial power anymore, unless he actually is able to win this round like he has the last 6 or 7. But this is the greatest protest and the greatest challenge to his hold on Turkey since the Gezi protests in 2013, 2014.
It's a beautiful thing when you see the masses of people in the square. I'm assuming it's the square. It just gave my heart, made me it skip a beat. What should America do when Hamas has called for the annihilation, extermination of Israel since its first charter? The second charter was not a charter. Just want everybody to be clear. Anytime you hear that, there is not a second charter. And they never removed that language. So we all know they're calling for the utter annihilation. I can't remember what's in Hezbollah's. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think we should play patty cake when anybody who says that, is praying, may Allah damn Zionist Israel. What do you think about that?
I take the actions of Middle East state and non-state actors by deed, not by word. Mm-hmm. You can say whatever you want in terms of trying to feign your desire for a peaceful relationship with Israel or the United States. But if you launch an attack like October 7th, that trumps every word that may have come out of your mouth. On the other hand, you have countries like Morocco, the UAE, Bahrain, even Sudan before the Civil War, Egypt, Jordan, which to differing levels, some for more state-to-state cooperation, others less so people to people, have shown it's possible to make peace between Israel and other Muslim and Arab actors. But Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, Turkey, all these other, what I would call agitators against Middle East peace processes, you have to see what they're doing day in and day out. And their actions are anathema to U.S. national security interests in the region and to its allies' interests. So you have to be very skeptical, and you have to look at every single thing that they say with a grain of salt and make sure it's followed up with deed, not just their words.
Yeah, I just feel like, well, let me ask you this. When the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, dissolved, whatever, dismembered, and Ataturk, I don't know if it was in 1924, 1922, whatever, you could correct me, dissolved the caliphate. I think so many people thought, oh, here is an example of a Muslim nation, and they're going to be secular. He banned, I don't know if it was the hijab, I forget, certain hats he banned, certain outward religious acts or rites he banned, and he changed the Arabic alphabet. Was it Arabic before? He changed the alphabet too.
Turkic Ottoman.
It was Turkic Ottoman, right?
And then eventually anglicized.
Yeah,
or phonetic, westernized.
Yeah, westernized. It was in Arabic script though, right? Before that, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so people see this way back and see, look, here's a secular Muslim state in the Middle East. There can be this kind of a thing, and they made it. But I don't think that's possible. Now, I think what we're seeing, what we've been seeing for years, is that the slide back into, some people would not like the term radical Islam. They would just say Islam in its most fundamental interpretation. And I wonder about all of the states and thinking like Palestine, as if it could ever be a peaceful state if there were a two-state solution. It's your opinion. I know with Saudi Arabia, I just saw that MSB came out and said that women can wear whatever they want. And I didn't even check the accuracy of it. I just think he may get assassinated. Is it possible for long-term a country like to do what Turkey did and survive and remain non-jihadi?
So the westernizing of the Middle East really took place with Napoleon landing in Egypt in the late 1700s, early 1800s, with the modernization of the then army there. And then Turkey came to board after World War I. Iran was a very secular place until the fall of the Shah. Even Egypt still maintains secular characteristics, even though Al-Azhar University is the heart of Sunni Islam. We have a partnership that extends in economic relations, trade, the exchange of education, culture between the West and the Middle East. You can have Islamic countries that are still conservative in terms of their religious disposition, but are now outwardly looking to export that Islamism to Europe, to the United States, elsewhere, or that are acting on Islamic principles, ancient Islamic principles of warfare, and trying to have Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, the land of war and the land of Islam.
Yeah.
And I think Saudi Arabia is a good example. I don't think between you and I and your listeners, there's any expectations that Saudi Arabia is ever going to become a democracy. Or there is any expectation that a country like Iraq or Syria or Morocco or Algeria will just get rid of their conservative Islamic jurisprudence. But there is a model for long-term secular governance with an Islamic flavor, if you will. Very much like in the United States, we have secular governance, but that's based in Judeo-Christian value.
That's right.
And that kind of partnership between Middle Eastern countries and Western countries, where we respect their cultural mores and they respect
Absolutely.
ours, is one that we should aim for. Not to try to change the character of a country, but to make sure that the building blocks of that country at least are within acceptable, I don't want to say international norms per se, but are ones that we can do business with, that we can do trade with. But the second that those values are then brought to our shores, threaten our interests in the region, that's where we have to intervene.
I'm glad you brought that up because I made this statement about Turkey and questioning whether or not it's possible over a period of time. Because when Turkey did it, I still think it was like 1920. So it's been 100 years. And look at them, right? And
Right. Well,
go ahead.
Interesting example, because there has been Western intervention in Turkey. In 1922, the Sultanate collapsed. In 1923, the modern Republic of Turkey was founded. But then in 1947, there was the civil war between communists and those who supported the West. This was about Turkey's inclusion into NATO. And for better part of 55 years, till the rise of Erdogan in 2002, when he was elected prime minister, there was Western support for Turkey maintaining a secular republic while still having a semblance of religious freedom in private life, not in terms of state-sponsored religion. But when Erdogan was accepted by George W. Bush, into sort of family of nations, and Bush relied on Erdogan 5 months into Erdogan's prime ministership to allow for American tanks to invade the 4th Armored Division, to allow for American tanks to invade northern Iraq to protect the Kurds. And Erdogan said last minute, we can't allow you to cross the Turkish-Iraqi border. You have to take container ships and go all the way around the Mediterranean through the Suez, cross the Red Sea into the Persian Gulf, and launch your tanks there. That should have been a warning signal to the West to say, this is a major American national security priority. Whether it was right or wrong, that's an issue for you to decide. But a NATO ally is not allowing their territory to be used for a U.S. defense priority, and that's where Bush should have cut Erdogan off. But instead, Bush welcomed Erdogan with open arms for the next 5 years of his administration. Obama thought of Erdogan as one of his best friends. Erdogan denounced Shimon Peres, a scion of the Israeli left, not at the right, as a child murderer.
A child murderer.
And there's all these signals about him, but he's still got a pass every single time. That should have stopped in 2003. But it's been left for him and his behavior to go unabated, unchallenged, except for one small time when he was holding an American pastor in Izmir, Andrew Brunson, back in 2018, I think. And Trump put tariffs on Turkish steel, sanctioned Turkish ministers, and the second the West intervened, one gave up. Why are we not doing that now? Well, next me.
Myself included, and I just don't believe that they belong in NATO. But because the problem is, everybody is so fearful. Well, I don't know if this is everybody's reason for it, but it's almost like a timorousness, just fragile, scared little 7-year-old girl and afraid to just say, no, you're out, right? And well, what kind of domino effect would it be? Well, that's what we heard when President Trump did one of the greatest things he's ever done, and that was to declare Jerusalem Israel's capital, and so, or acknowledge it. It's obviously always been true. And nothing happened. Nothing that we couldn't, or anybody couldn't handle, really. And so why don't we eject them from NATO? Is it just because NATO's a bunch of wusses, or?
There's no mechanism in the North Atlantic Treaty to remove a member.
Oh.
But you could just ostensibly say, we're going to have exercises with NATO minus, which would just not be invoking key to that. But this is a bigger issue, though, in terms of the U.S.'s relationship with Turkey. Right now, there's talk of the U.S. supplying Turkey with F-35 fighter jets. And this is while Turkey is building a Russian-sponsored nuclear reactor on its northern shores in the Black Sea, when it has already reverse-engineered American drone technology to be able to have its own production facilities in Turkey, which is then used against American allies in the region. And when Turkey purchased the S-400 anti-aircraft missile system which actually started in the Trump administration's Trump's first administration, to eject the Turks from the F-35 program. And this is one of the things that Biden, in our policy, right, we call balls and strikes, right? It doesn't matter who's president, it matters what the policies are.
Right.
Biden did not allow Turkey back into the F-35 system, did not allow that to be exported. And this is something that Democrats and Republicans robustly agree on in Congress. This is one of the few points that Erdogan and Turkey, as it stands now, should not have access to advanced U.S. armaments for the threat that it could end up in Russian or Chinese hands.
Yeah. Be used against Israel. Or America.
Israel maybe like number 5 or 6 on the list. It's important.
Right.
But in terms of our national security concerns, we do not want that fighter jet ending up into the hands of our greatest enemies. And they can then figure out how to shoot it out of the sky. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know why they're considering selling it to them, but it has to be something that I
President
think that
Trump is doing that?
There's talk of it, right? Nothing's been approved yet. But
I do not approve.
There are members of this administration that, not even this administration, because there's nothing on record yet, but there are Erdogan files that are in Washington, D.C. that openly advocate for supporting his government and selling the most advanced American weapons to his regime. And that should stop. It's not something that the president has decided on. It's not been an official policy announcement from his administration. But the people who are pushing for this to happen on the outside are trying to hoodwink the defense establishment, and that should not go unchallenged.
That is stunning. I agree with you, of course. I don't know how anyone could disagree with that. And I wonder, what do you think about any other Middle Eastern country getting F-35s besides Turkey?
There's an argument for the Emiratis to get it. They've been playing ball and have been one of our greatest allies in the region. Israel already. I would be against Egypt and Jordan getting it. Maybe if the Saudis were able to make a peace deal with Israel and they were able to access more advanced American arms, they could receive a modified version of it. Maybe there's an argument to give Morocco the jet. But besides those countries, I can't think of any others which would deserve it. Or
so
could
a
be
modified version, that's a great approach to it. Let's talk about Qatar. I was so worried when Witkoff went over to Qatar. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? I feel like, firstly, I know the financial, transactions that had happened before he was, tagged for this job. But I was really, really worried that it was all over then. I should have had a little bit more faith. Then the next day, I got a hold of my senses and said, wait a minute, this is now. Tomorrow is a different day. This is trying to get one win and have a certain level of victory. And then when he was in the Oval signing stuff, and somebody asked him, will the ceasefire hold? And he says, I don't know. He says, it's not my war. They'll just have to deal with it. Something very dismissive, which, bam, that told me all I needed to know. But do you think Witkoff is up to it? And do you think that the Trump administration really understands, like it used to in 45, understand that Qatar is a bad actor through and through?
I think that there might be some members of the Trump administration that have a favorable view of Qatar in the tactical sense because of what they see as efforts by the Qataris to try and support administration priorities. But you can't just look at one day of negotiations or 2-3 months in office to judge the Qataris as a whole. Past 20 years, they've been the most destabilizing force in terms of their funding, their coordination, their intelligence, and their outright support for non-state actors and for state actors that are America's greatest enemies in the region. And they're very, very good at their game. They are even right now accused of buying off 2 members of the Israeli prime minister's office in an investigation in Jerusalem today, Qatar. They are alleged to have given money to the Jerusalem Post, publish pro-Qatari articles. They are the subject right now of a corruption investigation and a criminal trial in Brussels at the European Parliament. You even have Menendez, who was put in jail for accepting Qatari bribes in the last case. So if you just look at their pattern of behavior, every time they've been caught, every time that they have quite literally been, identified with their hand in the cookie jar, that should be the long arm. And we actually put a conference on this back in 2019 called Qatar, U.S. Ally or Global Menace. And I find it that some members of Congress who were at that conference, who labeled Qatar as a malign actor, are now openly claiming some of my colleagues are prejudiced against the Qataris. And I just think you have to look at their record and what they're doing. And if you put everything on balance, they are against the United States in the Middle East. They are supporting some of the most nefarious actors that are against American policy, and they should be isolated, condemned, and if anything, corrected in terms of their behavior.
Well, Iran and Qatar are really, this is my characterization, the same animal. It's the good cop, bad cop, or it's the front, or what do you call that? I can't remember. It sounds like a Las Vegas term, but anyway.
Arsonist and firefighter at the same time.
Exactly. And so Iran is this drooling, rabid dog, and they would rip your throat out. And then Qatar is, let me get the leash and we'll try to placate this dog and retrain the dog. And their funding of education in America and their funding of elementary school education, as well as their media education. And I think they in the PLO organization for media have said that they have trained 7,500 journalists in Qatari propaganda for the Middle East or for Palestine. That's a lot of journalists, or maybe it's 75,000. It was a ridiculous number. They're very dangerous. Should we not just bring our troops out of there, our air base, and just cut ties?
I think the Saudis, I think the Emiratis, the Bahrainis would all be more reasonable and better off locations for the U.S. to station its air power rather than to keep it at Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar. There's a bigger issue here that goes beyond media, goes beyond education, goes beyond America's military bases in the region. If you look, any element of American power, the Qataris have tried to insert themselves in the middle of the generation of that power and co-opt it for its own interests. Look at education for a second. Schools, I'm going to list all centers of American influence. The best of America in these sectors go there, and they all have campuses or are paid for by the Qataris. Cornell in medicine, Northwestern in business, Georgetown in diplomacy, Carnegie Mellon in computer science, Texas A&M in nuclear engineering. The list goes on and on. They know exactly what they're doing with their investments in American education, and they know exactly how to pull the levers to create the aura of a pro-Qatari atmosphere in Washington, and they know how to hunker down when they're being held to account. Beyond that, they've tried to buy American sports teams. They have bought European sports teams. They have bought the centers of commerce in the UK through the purchase of Harrods in London. They own Paris Saint-Germain, the most popular soccer club in France. They have bought stars. They literally bought the World Cup in 2024.
Oh, yeah.
Or 2020. Anyway.
2022, something like that.
So,
one of those 20s.
But their pattern is evident. They've even tried to buy American Jewish community leadership, and they have tried to get directly into the Israeli prime minister's office. They are dangerous. They are a virus, and they have to be excised from the West as soon as possible.
Exterminated. Well, not the people, just the virus. Yeah, and do you think that we should pull our base out of there, and why not put it in Israel?
Well, I think there's a longstanding understanding between the U.S. and Israel that Israel does not require American troops on the ground to fight its wars.
Yeah, I agree.
force projection capability and from the trust of the alliance. Israel is better off as equal partner on the United States rather than solely relying on the United States. So I would be happy to see that based in an Arab country who doesn't have the military capabilities that Israel has, so they can both work together in a larger projection of power on the region rather than have everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of a dumb question because I don't think that I think Israel should be distanced as much as it possibly can. The fact that even in taking in money, I think that they need to move to the point where they're producing their own, the equivalent of an F-35. I don't understand about India right now and this whole, I'm very concerned about, I think I've voiced that I've been concerned about 27 times. I can't sleep at night. Anyway, I'm very concerned about the India transfer of technology to India and all these things. We won't go there because that's not really what you talk about. But I do not understand why Israel isn't, at least visibly, in a greater partnership with America on production for America of military, munitions, material, whatever, planes, and other kinds of AI and all these other strategic things that India and Modi is a master of manipulation. That's my characterization.
The Israel-U.S. defense partnership, going back to the late 70s, has several programs which have both benefited the U.S. national security apparatus and Israel. If you want to think about it, the engineering and the design of weapons platforms takes place in Israel. But then it's often taken to the United States, tested here, and then adopted by the U.S. military. Think of the Arrow 3 anti-ballistic missile interceptor, designed in Israel, manufactured in Israel, brought to Alaska to test on missiles, which might then come from Russia, China, or North Korea. The Iron Dome platform, which was financed by the United States, designed and manufactured in Israel, actually is owned by 2 U.S. military units, one in Guam and the other one in Conus in the United States. And you can apply that to the helmet for the F-35. We could apply that to small arms, cyber warfare capabilities, other asymmetrical warfare capabilities. There's a great balance there between Israel's role as a small superpower and the U.S.'s role as the ability to act as a force multiplier for Israeli technology. So to expand on that model, I think would benefit Israel and benefit the United States.
I do too. I think that they should be building F-35s and other major munitions and equipment and all the rest, military.
Model that I've heard is that there's an asset test in terms of U.S. defense partnership. And Israel may not have the ability to scale to engage in large-scale manufacturing. There's like 9-10 million people in the country. But it can certainly create intellectual property that then can lead to American manufacturing jobs.
Oh, they could just bring Indians in over to do it, since Indians can do all things.
I mean, India, and just in terms of its value, there's a great sort of triangle between India being an arms consumer, Israel being a designer, and then the U.S. having the ability to determine what allows India's qualitative military edge and Israel's qualitative military edge to allow India to be an anchor of U.S. security in the subcontinent rather than to be a competitor. And there's something where that can be molded if India moved more towards Israel model rather than asking Israel to be in a position where it sort of
overstretches its
really, going that way. There's weird to work on, but India is a pretty reliable ally for Israel, and it's ended up moving in the right direction of being a somewhat reliable ally for the United States.
Yeah. We have a problem with that, or at least I do, that this is the century of Asia. I think that got under Trump's skin when he heard that recently on Lex Friedman. So let me just see if I've got everybody down here. Julani, Qatar Kurds.
We didn't even talk about Iran, which is another thing.
Oh, yeah. Iran is down here toward the bottom. I don't know why. How is it? Okay, I just interviewed the Mujahideen al-Qas. How's its first name go? It's Reza. It's Ali Reza. I just interviewed him the other day, and I was skeptical because the history of the MEK is checkered. And but it was a very nice conversation. And the one thing I don't think I got an answer from him is you're saying you're not a military force, right? And obviously the resistance within Iran does not seem to have any kind of a military strength. And unless the IRCG is getting cracks in it, and, I don't know how we would ever know something like that. Maybe Israel would. How does the Iranian regime come down without arms?
So it really relies on non-kinetic coercion.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have American boots on the ground for the government. And popular content often ends up in armed revolt. But you have to start with a town-by-town, province-by-province strategy to support local actors who want to see change within the country rather than forcing it from the outside. So in my estimate, it's more important for the U.S. to dedicate resources to finding partners that are in country who do not want to see that regime proceed with its lifespan and would rather replace it, not necessarily with multi-ethnic, multi-democratic alternative, but something that will not have the Ayatollahs in control of the chessboard in Iranian politics. So instead of advocating for a position where you're destroying all of Iran's infrastructure, let's just make sure people don't show up for work. So the economy.
I don't want to see us going there. I wouldn't mind. Well, let's just talk about nukes for a moment. We've been hearing for many, many, many years that Iran is this close. And for some reason, I'm feeling that they are this close now. What is your sense?
You could destroy the nuclear program tomorrow. It won't stop from rebuilding, or another president coming in 4 years from now, 8 years from now, whenever else.
I agree with that, but I don't think that's not a deterrent, in my humble opinion or estimation.
Regime change from the inside is the only way to beat Iran.
And then we go in or inspectors go in and eliminate what they have accomplished.
Your Air Force, it could be missiles, it could be anything, but you have to have a two-pronged approach. A chicken and egg scenario. Either the nuclear program and then the regime, or the regime and then the nuclear program. But both have to go.
So we need to USAID needs to send money to the resistance in Iran.
However that looks.
Okay, let me just check this yet. Oh, Egypt is so repulsive to me in this facade of, I don't know what, the fact that they have not allowed the women, children, and elderly from October 8th or that couple of weeks there to move into a camp on the other side of the hot zones and saved lives. And I don't for a minute believe the numbers, of course, that we've ever been given. But the point is that now they have troops in the Sinai, a massive number. I couldn't believe the number of tanks that I saw, which is a lot of Middle Eastern Arab bravado as well. They do that so well. What do you think about Egypt and just what's going on with them? Are they wanting to?
I mean, at this point, but El-Sisi has a very real reason not allowing Palestinians into the Sinai Peninsula, which would be the survivability of his government in Cairo.
Yeah.
His people do not want to see Palestinians in Sinai as much as the United States does not want to see illegal immigrants in Texas. I understand that point.
I never heard that from the street. I didn't know that they were as against it as the government. They
say Palestinian issue is a Palestinian problem. They don't want it to become an Egyptian problem. And I get that.
I do
and
too.
As long as he is forced to have the balancing act between being the leader of the Arab world as Egypt sees itself and trying to find equitable solution to the Palestinian issue, I get why he doesn't want them in Sinai. But on the other hand, Egypt has to act as a partner with Israel and other Arab states, help remove Hamas and its ideology from Gaza. If they want Palestinians to stay in Gaza, they have to remove and do their part in making sure that Palestinians in Gaza do not fall under the influence of Hamas. It could be an Israeli occupation going house by house, town by town, getting rid of all the members of Hamas and their adherents.
Tunnel by tunnel.
Tunnel by tunnel. It could be an Egyptian occupation of Gaza. If they don't want the Palestinians to come in there, the Egyptians could be invited into Gaza to do the job themselves, or any other Arab country. But they have to make a decision on what they are going to do, support Israel or do it themselves.
What do you think about them going to Jordan, which is really 78% of the original Palestine mandate by the British?
I think that it stabilizes Jordan, and Jordan needs to stay as a blend of Hashemites, Bedouins, and the Palestinians they have.
Status quo.
If Jordan were to fall, that would mean that the U.S.'s security architecture in the region would also fall. And that's what I'm worried about, not coming from the West Bank and Gaza, but it's what I'm worried about in terms of a Sunni Syrian threat amassing on Jordan's borders.
Yeah, I've been a little worried about that myself. Well, see, there again, I'm staying up all night worrying about the Middle East and India. Wow. So my last question, and you're probably thinking, how many questions did she get on those 2 3x5 cards? I write very small. Are you a two-stater for Israel? I mean, I feel stupid to even ask this question. I don't know where you stand, but are you believing that we need to have you read Ambassador Friedman's book?
I had the privilege of sitting on a panel with him in his book launch in the Knesset last summer. I've skimmed over it.
Did they like it?
I think that they like the idea, but I think that this idea of talking about 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, 8 states is premature. I would categorize myself as solution agnostic, meaning that until you defeat the Palestinian national ambition, their dream, their raison d'etre, of pushing all the Jews into the sea, there is nothing to talk about. Wars end when one side has acknowledged that they've lost. The goal of people trying to move towards 1, 2, 3, whatever many states, chaos, could be for the Palestinians to abandon their nationalist ambitions of a 1-state solution in the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And bare minimum is to have Jewish control over areas where Jews currently live in Israel and major West Bank enclaves. Maybe if there's 7 people on a hilltop somewhere surrounded by 100,000 Palestinians, probably not the best idea. But if you're talking about major city centers, major towns in these areas, that's where the future of Israel's borders need to be.
Absolutely. They cannot have indefensible borders. They have to have strategic depth. They've got to have the entire Jordan Valley there. I'm a big advocate of the Emirate model, like Mordecai Kadar. I think he's adorable and brilliant.
Well, which was the last thing Israel needs is more Palestinians. Well, I guess I'm kind of in line with that line of thought. That's different, though, between Arab Israelis. Arab Israelis, the more integration they have into the society, there's this point, I don't need to belabor this, but the only place where Sharia courts work in the West is in Israel.
Do they? I've always wanted to ask somebody, and I always forget. Thank you for bringing that up. I have wondered, do they literally have Sharia courts just like they do in the UK?
Not like you would think about in the UK. If you think about marriage, divorce, issues of family property, call it domestic issues. You're not going to someone being stoned or beheaded. And all rulings from an Islamic court in Israel can be appealed to a higher civilian court. But that's the model between, as I said before earlier in the interview, you respect someone's religion, you respect their culture, You respect their way of life. They keep it private. They can accept to be part of that system. But if they don't want to, there's a civilian alternative.
You know, I kind of lied because I forgot about one really important question. So this is it. Here. We published the book Muslim Mafia years ago. Paul Sperry and what are the name of the book? I haven't talked about it, but this is a book where men went undercover and women into CARE, Counts for American Islamic Relations, and ended up coming out with pallets full, legally, of documents from CARE, which were extraordinary. Amazing book. Very proud of that one. I believe CARE should be designated a terrorist group. I think it should be out. I think all Qatari money needs to be gone and banned from all universities, education students, kindergartens. I believe that this Students for Justice in Palestine, all of those should be designated terrorist or terrorist adjacent or whatever you call it, jihadis, and gone. Because in our country, this is a Judeo-Christian country. It's the Torah. This is how I feel. I feel very strongly that unless Israel and America stand firm on their faith and the founding of their countries, that they lack a very, very strong appeal to the Muslim world, because the Muslim world, there is nothing that is not related to faith. So at least they can respect that. And to have these kinds of Islamic organizations that want subversively to, I mean, I know people think it's insane, bring Sharia to America, but look at the UK right now. Look at the UK that now their head of education for, not doctrine, but curricula for K through 12 or whatever they call it there, is a Muslim imam. That's insane. And there's 20,000 other points there, points of darkness there. What is your take on how we control Islam becoming, I'll be very politically incorrect because I think we need to start talking, well, you probably always have, but, and me too, but I want to start talking more and more in a very open way about the fact that culture at its foundation always has a religion. And if we don't acknowledge that in America, we're going the same way as the UK and lots of Europe, and that Islam is a problem in the West, more so than it's a problem in the Middle East, because jihadis don't last in Saudi Arabia.
I would just start off by saying I do not think that Islam is a problem in the West. I think Islamism is a problem in the West. There's a great article in Tablet Magazine, 2010, written by Sheikh Abdul Hadi Palasi, called Allah is a Zionist. You say the Quran is actually a philo-Semitic, in some portions, pro-Israel text, if read the right way. So if we acknowledge that religion is open to interpretation, just like in Judaism, you have Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionists. In Christianity, you have Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, all different denominations. Islam is the same way. Not all Islam is practiced according to what you would think comes from a jihadi canton or an interpretation of the Surah and Hadith, which are the ways in which the Quran is interpreted. And there's different schools of thought there too. So if you take the model that Muslims in America, for the most, contribute to American society. They're doctors, they're in the army, they're in, some in Congress are all right, some others are a lot more problematic. But if you accept that Muslims in America that embrace American values, the founding documents, the way in which this country has evolved over the past 250 years, you have that as a starting, and you say those who are with us in our ideas, and the way in which our country was constructed, we will embrace them. But those who are against American values, that try to replace democracy with Sharia, that try to
what do
bring
you
them
do with them?
So
when they're at the border and you're talking about visas, you can't. You're not God. I'm not God. We can't see into their heart and see that they're doing Takia, and they're really radicals because that happens all the time. And they come in, they've eventually become naturalized, and then they're radicalized, or they always were, or their kid or grandkid is. I don't want to be battling that forever because we're so mushy. And,
that the U.S. has dealt with it in the past with Nazism, communism, with other malign ideologies. You can bring extreme vetting to your immigration process. In fact, we've written extensively on extreme vetting of individuals with an Islamist background. And there's a policy model there that works. And there's all systems of the American immigration system which could root out Islamists from coming into the country. You do it based on ideology, not based on necessarily the country from where they came or the religion that they hold.
I agree. That is if we could do that successfully, but I don't believe that we should invite in, if we can't do it successfully, we shouldn't invite in our future downfall. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be the downfall, but I do not want to be at Christmas or in Passover. We keep Passover on the Sabbath, whatever. I don't want to always have jihadis with Palestinian flags and Hamas. I don't think that belongs in our culture. And so for me, this extreme vetting, my vision has always been, I can't wait to read your article on Middle East Forum, that I think that they should have to sign something and that they can be denaturalized because...
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, is that what you're talking about?
My wife is Israeli. She's in Israel. I was born in Kentucky, so I was born an American citizen, but I go back 200 years to Daniel Boone. So that's on my side. Yeah, Squire Boone or one of the Boones. But on the Israeli side, she had to fill out a form.
Was Daniel Boone a Jew?
No, I'm adopted. So I was kind of the Jewish faith. But in all seriousness, on the immigration form, ask you a litany of questions. Have you served in the foreign military? Have you ever spied on for a country? Are you a communist? Are you a Nazi? And you say, no. Why can we not add questions that vet whether an individual is an Islamist or not?
I agree.